The captain's voice carried across the whole firing line, and I remember thinking, even then, that he hadn't meant for it to carry quite that far. Calder, this isn't the kitchen. Go back to your tent. I was 20 years old, on the firing line at Outpost Halden with 11 other men, and I turned to see who he was talking to. Specialist Calder stood near the ammunition cans at the edge of the range, not holding a rifle, not even close to one, just watching, the way she sometimes did, with her sleeves rolled and flour still dusted on one forearm from the mornings. Bread. I was only watching, sir, she said. Calm. No edge to it at all. Watch from somewhere else. This is a working range, not a place for the cook tent's little angel to stand around. A few of the men laughed. Not cruelly, exactly. Just the easy laugh of men who'd decided long ago that Calder was the soft edge of the outpost, the one who patched your gear and slipped you extra rations when the mess line ran short, and nothing more than that. I laughed too. I'd gotten a jacket back from her 3 weeks before with a torn shoulder seam mended so cleanly. I hadn't been able to find the stitch line, and I'd thought, at the time, that's just Calder, being Calder. She didn't argue. She picked up the crate of bread she'd carried out for the range detail, set it down where the senior NCO could reach it, and walked back toward the kitchen tent without another word. The captain didn't even watch her go. He turned back to the line, called the next shooter forward, and the morning went on as if nothing had happened, because, to every man on that range, nothing had. I want to be honest about what I thought of her, because it matters for what came after. I thought she was kind. I thought she was probably the kindest person at Outpost Halden, the one who remembered which of us didn't get letters from home and made sure we had something hot on the bad nights, who never once complained about the long hours in that tent, with the propane stove that never quite worked right. She had been at Halden longer than most of us, transferred in 18 months earlier with a personnel file that, as far as anyone bothered to check, said cook detail, secondary duty, and nothing else. Nobody asked what the secondary duty had been before that, because nobody thought there was anything to ask. I did not think of her as anything else, and if you had told me that morning that she could end a fight at a distance, most of the platoon couldn't even see across, I would have laughed along with everyone else, and laughed harder. Outpost Halden sat on a ridge of broken rock and hard-packed dirt, overlooking a wide valley we'd been told, in the briefings, was quiet. It mostly was. We ran patrols, we manned the wall in rotation, and twice a week the kitchen tent put out something that almost tasted like home, and that was the rhythm of the place. The same rhythm, day after day, until the morning, 4 days after the range, when the laughing stopped for good. It started with a single round that took a chip out of the Eastern Guard Tower at 0530, close enough to put dust in Corporal Brennan's eyes, and far enough that no one could say where it came from. I was on radio watch, half asleep, and the first thing I remember is Brennan's voice going from routine to flat and fast in the space of one syllable. Then a second round came in, 20 minutes later, and put a hole clean through the water tank we'd spent half the morning filling. By the time the captain had the outpost on full alert, we'd taken 6 rounds from at least 2 positions, both well beyond the range of anything we'd zeroed our weapons for, and every man who tried to return fire from the wall got nothing but the sound of his own shot disappearing into the haze, useless. Range is at least 3,000 meters, Master Sergeant Voss said, crouched behind the wall with a spotting scope that was doing him no good at all. He'd been at Halden longer than any of us, and I had never heard his voice go quite that careful before, maybe more. We don't have anyone who can touch that. Then we sit here and take it, the captain said, until air support clears. Air support is 40 minutes out, sir, and Brennan's tower position is exposed the whole time. Voss lowered the scope. He was quiet for a moment. I was close enough to see him decide something, the way a man decides something he's been sitting on for a long time and finally runs out of better options. Sir Calder. Calder's a cook. Calder was a designated marksman before her program got folded into ours administratively 18 months ago. 11 confirmed precision interdictions on her old unit's books. There's a notation in her file. Most of us never read past cook detail, secondary duty, that says she held a record cold bore shot at 3,400 meters before that unit was disbanded outright, and the records got scattered across 3 commands. Boss paused, and for a moment he looked almost ashamed of himself. I read the whole file once, sir, about a year ago, on a slow night. I didn't say anything because I didn't think it mattered anymore. I think I was wrong about that. I watched the captain's face. I have thought about that look more times than I can count since. Not disbelief, exactly, but the particular blankness of a man being handed a fact that doesn't fit anywhere in the shape of his mourning, a fact he is going to have to rearrange a great deal to make room for. Get her. She came at a jog in the same flour-dusted jacket, and she did not ask what was happening before she reached the wall. She'd already heard the rounds, already counted the gap between them. Already, I think, started doing the math before anyone said a word to her. Voss handed her the long rifle we kept for exactly this kind of situation and had, never once in my time at Halden, seen used. It looked in her hands like something that belonged there. Not awkward, not borrowed, just returned. Cold bore, she said, more to herself than to anyone. She settled into the position at the wall as though she'd done it 1,000 times. Because, I understood later she had. Not a flicker of hesitation, not a single wasted motion. She read the wind first, watching the dust drift off the ridge for a long 3 seconds. Then adjusted something on the scope with 2 fingers, calm as a woman checking whether bread had risen. I noticed even then that her hands were shitfreaking and mine were. Range? The captain said. 3,400, give or take 50, she said without lowering the scope. Same ridge as the first round. He's using the same firing point. There's a heat shimmer off the rock face now that wasn't there an hour ago, which means he's fired enough rounds to warm the barrel and hasn't moved. She said it the way she might have told you the bread needed 5 more minutes. Hold. Don't anyone move on the wall. The 7th round came in. Closer this time. Close enough that I went flat against the wall with everyone else. Dust kicking up 6 feet from Brennan's position. Close enough that for 1 second I thought it had found him. Calder didn't move. She'd already found the shooter. I understood, watching her, that she had used those 7 incoming rounds the way the rest of us used a stopwatch. Every shot the enemy fired had told her something about his position, his rhythm, his confidence, and she had been quietly assembling the picture the whole time the rest of us were ducking and praying. She exhaled, slow, and held. The shot, when it came, was a single flat crack that didn't sound like much of anything against the open desert. Nothing like the movies, no thunder, just one clean report, and then a silence that seemed to last far longer than it actually did. 3.5 seconds later, I counted, because I had nothing else to do with my hands, and counting was the only thing keeping me from shaking. The incoming fire simply stopped. All of it, both positions, gone quiet at once. Whatever Calder had hit at 3,400 meters cold bore, first round, it had ended the engagement entirely, and I have never in my life heard a quiet that loud. Confirmed hit, I said into the radio, because someone had to, and my voice came out steadier than I expected it to. All clear. Repeat, all clear, both positions silent. For a moment nobody on the wall moved at all. Then Brennan let out a breath I heard from 20 feet away, and somewhere behind me a man I won't name said, very quietly, "What in the world?" And nobody laughed this time. Not at the words, not at anything. Calder lowered the rifle, checked the chamber, and began breaking it down with the same unhurried care she used on a torn jacket seam, wiping the action, setting the components down in order on a cloth she'd produced from somewhere, as though the most important thing in the next 60 seconds was that the rifle go back together clean for whoever needed it next. She didn't look around at any of us. She didn't say anything at all, and for a long moment the only sound on the wall was the small, careful click of metal parts being set down in a row. The captain walked the length of the wall alone. I watched him go, and I think every man on that line watched him too, because none of us knew what he was about to do any more than he did, probably, until he'd already started doing it. He stopped behind Calder's position, looked down at her for a long moment while she worked, and then, slowly, deliberately, in front of 11 men who 4 days earlier had laughed when he called her the cook tent's little angel, he went down on one knee in the dust beside her and rendered a formal salute. She looked up from the rifle. For just a moment, something crossed her face that I had never seen there before. Not pride, not vindication, just a kind of tired recognition, the look of someone who has been seen clearly for the first time in a long while and isn't quite sure what to do with it. "Specialist," the captain said, "I owe you an apology I don't know how to make big enough." "You don't owe me anything, sir," she said, and went back to the rifle, fitting the last piece into place. The shot was the job. The rest of it, she nodded toward the kitchen tent, toward the mended jackets and the extra bread and 4 days of being the soft edge of the outpost. That's just who I am. They're not different things, sir. I never thought they were. I don't know why everyone else seemed to. He held the salute a moment longer than the moment required, and then he stood and gave the order to stand the wall down. Master Sergeant Voss told me afterward that the captain went straight to his quarters and pulled Calder's full file. All 11 interdictions, the disbanded unit, the record shot, the 18 months it had sat under cook detail, secondary duty without anyone above battalion ever reading past the first line. He had it transferred properly. By the end of that week, her real qualification, restored to her record, where any commander after him would actually see it, and a formal note attached explaining, in plain terms, exactly how it had been overlooked for so long and whose responsibility that had been. For the rest of that week, Calder kept running the kitchen tent exactly as before. The propane stove still didn't work right. The bread still came out at the same hour, and she still carried the crate to the range on the mornings the platoon trained, and set it down and stayed to watch. Only now, when the captain saw her standing there, he didn't say a word, and neither did anyone else. It struck me, watching that nothing about her had changed at all. Only what the rest of us understood had changed. I still have the jacket she mended. I never got around to telling her, before I rotated out, that I'd kept it on purpose, long after the seam had worn through again somewhere else. Not because I needed it, but because every time I put it on, I thought about the morning I'd laughed along with everyone else, and about the 4 seconds of silence after a shot that traveled farther than most of us could see, fired by the same hands that had sewn that seam without ever once mentioning what else those hands could do. We never saw the cook tent the same way again after that. None of us ever called anyone just anything at Outpost Halden for the rest of that deployment. Not the radio operator, not the supply clerk, not the quiet woman who brought out the bread crate and stood at the edge of the range, watching, the way she always had, for reasons none of us had ever bothered to ask about, until the one morning we finally found out.